Hello guys and welcome to the 200 subscriber special. This time I will talk about the possible box office performance of The Avengers Infinity War. I know I said that this subscriber special will be about Infinity War and Infinity War Part 2, but since Infinity War Part 2 is now called Untitled Avengers and the movie is so incredibly far away, I will just talk about the possible box office performance of Infinity War. First of all, I want to thank you guys. I know that for most people 200 subscribers is nothing, but I'm very proud of this accomplishment and trust me, it took tons of work for me to give you all these predictions and I'm really satisfied that I have a small fan base now which is watching my videos on a constant basis. In the last few months my video output decreased pretty hard because I have tons of work to do at college, so I thought about something. I opened a Patreon account for G.O.B.O Box Office so you guys can support me when you want to support me. I'm grateful for every support that I can get and I would love to make this thing my job, but for this I still have to go a very long way. Anyways, when you decide to support me, you can find the link to the G.O.B.O Box Office Patreon page in the description box below. I also started to partner up with Amazon over affiliate links. So when you want to support me in a different way, just click the affiliate link in my description box when you want to buy something. It will not be more expensive for you, but I will earn a little bit, so you're supporting me without paying more. Good, enough with the intro talk, let's begin with the prediction with a look back on Marvel's Phase 1, which includes Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man 2 and the first Avengers movie. When the Marvel Phase 1 dropped from 2008 to 2012, Marvel and Disney made a great job by creating a solid base for the upcoming movies. From all 6 movies, every budget landed between $140 and $220 million and every movie, excluding Hulk, managed to gross its budget back at least 2 times. Excluding Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man and Iron Man 2 all grossed between $370 and $623 million worldwide. And with that, Marvel made the brand more known all over the planet. It's funny that almost every Marvel movie released right now under the name of Disney, which would gross something like $370 to $450 million worldwide, would be considered a disappointment. Just another sign of how great the popularity of the franchise exploded over the years. This Marvel Phase 1 concluded in Marvel's The Avengers, which opened on May 4th, 2012 and destroyed all expectations. The Avengers opened to $207 million, still the 3rd biggest domestic opening weekend of all time, just surpassed slightly by Jurassic World and outgrossed by $40 million by the box office giant Star Wars The Force Awakens. The movie grossed a total of $623 million in the domestic market and a total of $895 million from overseas territories, for a combined worldwide total of $1.518 billion. With that, Marvel's The Avengers destroyed a lot of box office records and became the 3rd highest grossing movie of all time worldwide and the 3rd highest grossing movie of all time in the domestic market. In the last 5 years, only Jurassic World and Star Wars The Force Awakens managed to surpass The Avengers on both lists. Again, another sign of how great the movie performed. On top of that, The Avengers is one of only 4 movies out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe which accomplished a multiplier of above 3. The other titles are the first Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man. The big question is of course, why did the grosses explode so extremely much with The Avengers? Before The Avengers dropped, Iron Man 2 was the highest grossing Marvel picture with $312 million in the domestic market and $311 million from overseas territories for a combined worldwide total of $623 million. The Avengers almost doubled the domestic gross of Iron Man and almost tripled the overseas gross of Iron Man 2. How the hell came that together? Well, to be quite fair, the answer is a pretty easy one. The Avengers was a once-in-a-lifetime happening when it comes to the movie experience. To make movies for single superheroes and then to put them all together in one movie is really an idea which is almost doomed for failure when it comes to the sheer quality of the movie. But in case of The Avengers, everything fell into perfect place. The movie had a great quality, almost every fan loved it, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for moviegoers, and every other thing you could think about worked perfect for the Avengers. Just think about, in the last 5 years, there was not one comic book movie which accomplished to outgross the Avengers. Of course, there were not a lot comic book movies which were the same size like the Avengers. I can just think of Age of Ultron, Civil War and Batman vs Superman right now, but either the quality wasn't as good as with the Avengers, or the movie just didn't manage to perform as good over the long run as the Avengers. No, there is an obvious question. Was Marvel's The Avengers the ceiling for comic book movies at the box office? The answer to that question comes with my analysis about the Marvel Phase 2. The Marvel Phase 2 includes Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. All of these movies finally led to the release of the second Avengers installment, Avengers: Age of Ultron. In this Marvel Phase 2, the all-around gross of the Marvel pictures increased by an insane amount. The Avengers gave all upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe movies a huge bump overseas and also a very high increase in grosses in the domestic market. For example, Iron Man 2 grossed 312 million in the domestic market. Iron Man 3, after the Avengers, grossed $409 million and is with that still the highest grossing Marvel Cinematic Universe movie in the domestic market outside of the Avengers movies, even outgrossing Captain America: Civil War. Iron Man 2 grossed $311 million overseas, outside of the Avengers. This was the highest grossing overseas gross of any Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Iron Man 3 grossed an insane $805 million overseas. Behind the Avengers movies, the highest overseas gross out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All around, Iron Man 3 almost doubled the worldwide gross of Iron Man 2. The second Thor outgrossed the first Thor by 43%, and most of that came from overseas territories. The second Captain America outgrossed the first one by an insane 93%, and most of that, again, came from overseas territories. After that, there was the summer smash hit Guardians of the Galaxy, which outgrossed even the performance of the second Thor, the second Captain America and the first and second Iron Man by being the first installment out of a new Marvel movie series. All of this led to Age of Ultron, which opened to a massive $191 million opening and concluded to $1.4 billion worldwide, outgrossing the first Avengers movie on the overseas side but falling short of the Avengers domestic gross. When we put all of this information together, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that the growing success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe comes by the biggest part from the increasing overseas performances. Disney made a great job with the Marvel brand all over the world, and they are winning because of that every single time right now. Don't get me wrong, the domestic performances are also very, very good and are on a very high level, but the overseas performances weigh in even more to the success of the brand. Now, what about the question if the Marvel Cinematic Universe brand hit a ceiling with the Avengers? Well, in the domestic market, unless a miracle happens, the comic book genre and with that the Marvel Cinematic Universe really already hit its highest point. When you just look at all comic book movies ever released, they pretty much all peak under 460 million in the domestic market. The only 3 movies which outgrossed this mark in the domestic market are The Dark Knight, The Avengers and the first Spider-Man adjusted for inflation. And all of these movies were event movies, happenings that does not come every 2 or 3 years. The Dark Knight grossed $533 million in the domestic market and $658 million adjusted for inflation because of the death of Heath Ledger and the, because of that, huge popularity of the Pig before the movie even came out. On top of that, the overall talk that The Dark Knight is one of the greatest movies ever released helped the movie to peak on such a high gross. When it comes to Spider-Man, the movie earned a massive $403 million in the domestic market in 2002, which puts it at $614 million adjusted for inflation. The Avengers was the first time a bunch of superheroes came together in one movie. It was the first time that a studio tried to pull this achievement off, and on top of that, the quality was also very good. The Avengers grossed 623 million back in 2012, which makes up for 679 million adjusted for inflation. That's it. These 3 movies are the only comic book movies which achieved to gross over $600 million in the domestic market adjusted for inflation, and they only did it because of sensational circumstances. Every other comic book movie which is now coming out is just another comic book movie. I know that this sounds weird, but I think that you guys know what I mean. Let's take a look at other very big comic book movies outside of these 3 titles. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Age of Ultron, Civil War, Iron Man 3, The Dark Knight Rises, Wonder Woman. All of those movies grossed or will gross between 380 and 460 million in the domestic market. And this is right where the ceiling for the normal comic book movies is. Of course, a ceiling doesn't mean that it can't be lifted a little higher over time, but I don't think that it will be lifted by much. When you look just at the Marvel Phase 2 movies, there is of course a great sign that the ceiling is not there in overseas territories. But the ongoing Marvel Phase 3 is showing something a little bit different. Alright, let's take a look at the already released Marvel Phase 3 movies. We have Ant-Man, which came out roughly 2 months after Age of Ultron. After that, on May 6th, 2016, Civil War, also called The Avengers 2.5, was released. The second Marvel Cinematic Universe movie released in 2016 was the very well received Doctor Strange. And the last movie is the currently still running Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. While Ant-Man wasn't built to be a huge box office monster, it still managed to gross roughly $520 million worldwide on a, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, very small budget of just 130 million. By that, the movie almost managed to gross its budget back 4 times. Of course, you can now use the comparison of Ant-Man to other Marvel Cinematic Universe origin movies like Captain America or the first Thor, and in comparison to them, Ant-Man beat them. But Ant-Man came out to a totally different time, where the Marvel brand was way more established, so this comparison is kind of dumb. But all in all, the performance from Ant-Man was pretty good. When we now look at Civil War, it gets very difficult. Before Civil War was released, there was so much talk about this movie maybe beating Age of Ultron worldwide and maybe grossing over $500 million in the domestic market. At the end of its run, Civil War stood at $408 million in the domestic market and at $1.153 billion worldwide. With that, Civil War became the 4th highest grossing movie of all time out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just behind The Avengers Age of Ultron, and Iron Man 3. Of course, it would be stupid to call Civil War a disappointment with such numbers, but I can say that I was just a little disappointed by the performance of the movie. I think that the most disappointing fact is that Iron Man 3 outgrossed Civil War. Iron Man 3 was less well received from audiences and critics alike, and on top of that didn't have the advantage of featuring a ton of beloved Marvel Cinematic Universe characters in it. Civil War came in perfect. There couldn't have been a more perfect situation for Civil War. The movie was met with universal acclaim from all over the planet. Most people even called it the best movie out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and on top of that, the direct opponent of Civil War, Batman v Superman, flopped brutally a few weeks before Civil War, giving Civil War even more box office power with great reviews. In the end, Civil War dropped pretty fast, with a 2.27 multiplier, and landed right in the zone that I named earlier, which I called the ceiling zone for the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the domestic market. Just to end the talk and to make things clear for Civil War. Civil War is a huge box office success. It is currently still the 14th highest grossing movie of all time worldwide, and to not name this movie as one of the best performances out of the comic book genre is just insane. The very negative talk that I just did on this movie just comes together because I want to make very clear that Civil War is a pretty perfect example of where the ceiling for this franchise is. Alright, let's move on to the next project, Doctor Strange. To be honest, Doctor Strange is, at least from my perspective, a very great performer from 2016, maybe even one of the best. Doctor Strange opened to $85 million, the third biggest opening weekend for a superhero origin movie out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just eclipsed by the first Iron Man with $98 million and the first Guardians with $94 million. The movie earned, at least for the comic book genre, very good 2.73 multiplier and closed its run with $232 million in the domestic market, outgrossing the second Thor installment and coming close to Captain America: The Winter Soldier. From overseas territories, Doctor Strange collected a total of $445 million for a combined worldwide gross of $677.7 million. The most important thing right here is the overseas gross of Doctor Strange. Please keep these $445 million in mind. And let's continue with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is still running in cinemas, but right now, the movie sits on $816.5 million worldwide as I'm writing this prediction. $355.4 million from the domestic market and $461 million from overseas territories. When everything is said and done, Guardians Volume 2 will probably settle for something between $380 and $390 million in the domestic market and something like $475 to $485 million from overseas territories, for a combined worldwide total of $855 to $875 million. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 also almost met perfect conditions for its box office run. The hype before the release was very big, the marketing was very good, and on top of that, every movies which could have hurt the performance of Guardians over the long run failed at the box office pretty hard. Alien Covenant, King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, Baywatch and Pirates all kind of underperformed, giving Guardians 2 enough room to shine over 4 weeks. Also, the movie was met with very good reviews and audience reactions. I have to admit that the reactions were a bit better for Doctor Strange or Civil War, but still, the reactions were very good. When we now look at the domestic final gross, it will be right in line with the ceiling zone for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When we now look at the overseas gross, we see that it lands pretty much right in line with the overseas gross of Doctor Strange. Also with the overseas gross of The Winter Soldier, the overseas gross of Thor 2 and the overseas gross of the first Guardians. Because of that, I think that for all Marvel Cinematic Universe movies which have nothing to do with the Avengers and does not feature Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, there is a real struggle of smashing the $500 million mark in overseas territories. With that, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is maybe on its way to an overseas ceiling. Of course, the overseas market is constantly growing, so every ceiling is probably going to break sometime in the future. But right now, $500 million for movies excluding Robert Downey Jr. and the Avengers movies and happenings like the last Thor movie or something like that is pretty much the ceiling. Alright, let's take a look at the movies which are still to be released before Infinity War hits cinemas, which are part of the Marvel Phase 3. There is Spider-Man Homecoming, followed by Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther. All of these movies, especially Spider-Man Homecoming and Thor Ragnarok, will be huge at the box office and will maybe break those ceilings that I just named for the overseas performances. I think it's pretty easy to say that when those movies fall right in line with the last 3 movies out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe when it comes to the quality of the movies. Infinity War is in a very good position, and when on top of that, Disney finally has the courage to break their now 7-year-old formula of making comic book movies and doing something different, then and just then I could see something really great happening. When those 3 movies are really nothing special, when they are released and at the end comic book movie stuff that we have seen from Disney the last 7 years, then I can't see Infinity War to break the Avengers comic book movie record. Let's take a look at what Infinity War has going for the project. Of course, the directors, the Russo brothers, are a huge pro point for the project. The Marvel fans are aware of the fact that the 2 most loved Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Captain America: Civil War, were made by those brothers, and with that, Infinity War is in really good hands. The next thing going for the project is of course Disney as a production company and the still perfect evolving Marvel Cinematic Universe. Until now, Disney hasn't made a box office fail with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, since the first Infinity Stone was shown in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the fans are waiting for Thanos to take action in the franchise. And with that finally happening in Infinity War, this will help the movie also extremely much. What will actually not help the movie's performance, and especially the chances to beat the Avengers at the domestic box office, is the competition Infinity War has to face. When it comes to comic book movies, they are really all front-loaded and earn most of their money in the first 3 weeks. The competition after those first 3 weeks is not so important, very unfortunately. When Infinity War wants to beat the Avengers in the domestic market, it has to perform great over the long run. On the 4th weekend of Infinity War's run, it has to face the giant Han Solo anthology movie. And on the 5th weekend of Infinity War's run, it has to face the giant Deadpool 2. While both movies, Han Solo anthology and Deadpool 2, are no match for Infinity War overseas, both of them could hurt Infinity War bad, and with that, the chances to beat the Avengers at the domestic box office are lower. Alright guys, this is it. Now, after all this intro talk, I will start with the pessimistic prediction on Infinity War. Let's say in the most pessimistic scenario, Infinity War hits an all-time low when it comes to the critics' reactions towards the movie. Something like a 65% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I admit that a rating this low for an Avengers movie is really unrealistic right now. But let's just think for a moment that this can happen. When on top of that, the Han Solo movie is great, Deadpool 2 performs well over expectations, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies before Infinity War all kind of disappoint when it comes to the quality, well, then I think that Infinity War will break $1.2 billion worldwide just slightly. In this scenario, Infinity War will open with $188 million, under the opening weekend of Age of Ultron and the first Avengers from 2012, but still the 5th biggest opening weekend of all time, just 3 million behind Age of Ultron. The movie will fall pretty fast, a bit faster than Civil War, and will end with a 423 million total in the domestic market, after a 2.25 multiplier. From overseas territories, Infinity War will collect a total of $800 million for a combined worldwide cum of $1.223 billion. With this amount of money, Infinity War will become the 3rd highest grossing comic book movie just behind Ultron and the Avengers, and will also have the 3rd highest gross in the domestic market and the 3rd highest gross in the overseas market for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Infinity War would become the 7th highest grossing movie in the domestic market and the 12th highest grossing movie worldwide, pushing Iron Man 3 to 13th place. Keep in mind, this is the most pessimistic scenario in my opinion, and we are talking about already very good numbers here. Now let's continue with the realistic prediction. Let's say Infinity War meets the quality level of Ant-Man or Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with a low 80% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and most audiences from all over the planet really like the movie, and when on top of that Spider-Man Homecoming and Thor Ragnarok does not disappoint, then I can think that Ultron can wave bye-bye to the 2nd best spot for Marvel Cinematic Universe grossers. In this scenario, Infinity War will open with $198 million, and after a multiplier of 2.65, will finish its domestic performance with $524.7 million. From overseas territories, Infinity War will collect a total of $935 million for a combined worldwide total of $1.459.7 billion. With that, Infinity War will land on 2nd place behind the Avengers in the domestic market and on 2nd place behind Age of Ultron in the overseas market when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, let's think about the most optimistic outcome possible for Infinity War. When Infinity War hits an all-time high for the Marvel Cinematic Universe when it comes to the reactions, something like a 95% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and an A+ cinema score from the fans, and when on top of that, all films before Infinity War, including Black Panther, are received very good, and the Han Solo movie as well as Deadpool 2 disappoint a bit, well then, but just then, the Avengers will fall from the comic book throne. In this scenario, Infinity War will open with a sensational $215 million, and after a multiplier of 3, will finish its domestic performance with a total of $645 million, beating the Avengers by 22 million. From overseas territories, due to a breakout performance in China, Infinity War will collect a total of $1.06 billion for a combined worldwide gross of $1.705 billion. Infinity War will become only the 7th movie to gross over $1 billion just from overseas territories and the first comic book movie to break that mark. Infinity War will outgross Jurassic World by $34 million worldwide and will claim the 4th spot on the highest grossing movies of all time worldwide list. Domestically, Infinity War will settle for 5th place behind Jurassic World, and with the opening weekend of $215 million, Infinity War will have the 2nd biggest opening weekend of all time, just behind Star Wars The Force Awakens. This outcome would be absolutely sensational and would help Disney to push the Marvel brand to even more extreme heights when it comes to the box office power. The next video will be a prediction about the Emoji Movie. Finally, this prediction is done. It really was tons of work for me to put this together, and I hope that you all enjoyed this way too long video. As I said in the intro, there is the link to the official Game of Box Office Patreon page in the description box, as well as the Amazon affiliate link. Feel free to support me when you genuinely like what I do here on YouTube. You can also find the link to the official Facebook page and Twitter page in the description box below. See you soon, guys. More videos to come. Bye bye.